off this countdown, we have Ruby, Arizona. Established in 1910, Ruby used to be a popular mining town. Now it's a popular and well-preserved ghost town. The population of this area started off small, but over the years it gradually increased. At its peak, it had a population of about 1,200 residents. Now, since the population number was so small, they really didn't have a proper law enforcement system. In fact, a lot of families were scared to live there. Between 1920 to 1922, Ruby and the surrounding area was the scene of 3 double known as the Ruby Murders. In 1920, 2 brothers were found shot in their store. One with a bullet in his head and his back, the other brother had been shot through his left eye. Then in 1921, the store's new owner was attacked, killed, and their store was robbed. Then in 1940, the mine closed down, and the next year the town was pretty much abandoned. Coming in at number 9, we have New Idria, California. New Idria was once another popular mining area. However, over the years, mercury has been seeping into the water and ground, contaminating it. It's considered way too toxic for people to live there. On top of the mercury problem, they also have an asbestos problem. So yeah, EPA declared it not a safe area to be in, let alone live in. In our 8th spot, we have Tawerga, Libya. Back in 2011, residents of this town were forced to leave by resistance forces. Buildings were burnt and ransacked, and people's possessions were thrown about, littering the streets. There once was 30,000 people living there. Now it's home to no one, and the residents are never allowed to return home. This is one of the places you literally can't visit. The whole area is defended by a small military. You probably will be killed if you try to visit this area. Also, good luck finding it. Its main road is now erased from road signs, and there's no directional arrows telling you where to go. All that's left of this place are destroyed homes and lone cats and dogs. Moving on at number 7, we have Pyramiden, Norway, or as it is now called, the Soviet ghost town in the Arctic Circle. So way up in the Arctic Circle is Pyramiden. Probably said that wrong, I apologize. A once popular mining town. During World War II, this mining town was very successful. However, it fell following the downfall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Then the town was the site of a tragic accident. A plane crashed in the area, killing some of the residents. After that incident, the town could no longer support its residents, and by 1998, it was deserted. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place, and homes look like they are ready to welcome families back. But no one wants to step foot in an area where such a big tragedy occurred. In our 6th spot, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance. But more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there's no citizens working inside the big tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as being completely empty, and he says it's 10 times creepier at night. There's a bunch of brightly lit roads, but no one is driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards his car, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? He has no idea, but now he thinks that the area is haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Forlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the town to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. He hoped to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazon for car tires and such. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a leaf fungus, and then they died. Then his team and him kept getting into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers. So in 1945, he canceled the plans and sold it to the Brazilian government. All that remains are a couple of structures overgrown by nature. In our 4th spot, we have Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma was once a popular lead and zinc mining town. In fact, it was home to a number of families. But in the mid-90s, a third of the younger population suffered from lead poisoning, and they were experiencing and cognitive issues, but they kinda just ignored that and continued living there until 2006. That's when it was discovered that 80% of the buildings were pretty much going to collapse at any time. In fact, one motorist died after driving into a huge hole in the ground. After they discovered that, the population dropped to only 20 people. People fled like crazy. They got the heck out of there. In our third spot, we have Sanchi Pod City. Located just outside of New Taipei, this city is filled with pretty weird styled homes. These homes literally look like UFO pods stacked on top of each other. In fact, it has been nicknamed the UFO houses. So construction of the city began in 1978, and it was meant to be like a vacation resort area. But a lot of bad things happened in the area, which stopped construction. Several fatal car accidents occurred near the construction sites, and then they lost a lot of investments, so the whole thing just came tumbling down. Now it's said that the area is cursed with bad luck. This is because they bisected a Chinese dragon statue near the front gates. By doing so, it's bad luck, and that's why the project was never finished. In our second spot, we have Kentubik, Uzbekistan, otherwise known as Asbestos Island. This area was where biological weapons were being tested out. One of the labs there worked with smallpox and the bubonic plague. In 1971, 10 people on the island contracted smallpox, and 3 died as a result of the testings. Then in 1988, when they banned biological weapons, they buried tons of anthrax spores in the area. In fact, it was considered the world's largest anthrax dumping grounds. Over the years, there have been attempts to decontaminate the area, but they still believe it's way too hazardous to live there. As a result, it lays abandoned. And in our number 1 spot, we have Ipetuan, Argentina. Ipetuan was once known as a perfect spa destination with its therapeutic thermal waters. In fact, since the lake was so rich in minerals, it was used to treat certain skin conditions, muscle pain, joint inflammation, and diabetes. But sadly, the area was hit hard with a bunch of rainstorms and floods. Following this, a dam broke which was protecting the area, and tons of water poured in. Residents said that they woke up to ankle-deep water in their home. The water level rose a centimeter each hour. 2 weeks later, it was 3 meters deep. By 1993, it was 10 meters deep. The village became uninhabitable and abandoned. It's said that the residents never fully recovered from the trauma of losing everything literally overnight. It's so sad. Now there are attempts to rebuild the area, but chances are nobody is going to move back to an area where the same thing could happen again.
Number 10. Zak Bagans' Haunted Museum. I figured I'd get this one out of the way off of the top. I've talked about this a few times on my home channel, Top 5 Scary, and it's worth shouting out over here as well. Zak Bagans is the famed paranormal investigator from Ghost Adventures, and he spent most of his adult life collecting and hunting things beyond the veil, and he's put it all under one roof for your pleasure. The building itself is said to be haunted, and to Vegas residents, stories go that it used to be home in the late 70s to all kinds of satanic and dark rituals. Since then, it's been rumored to be haunted, no doubt why Bagans wanted to open it there. Bagans' collection boasts some truly impressive relics like the Dybbuk box, thought to be one of the most cursed objects in the entire world. Visitors to the museum report all sorts of unease, seeing strange shadows and figures while they navigate the halls. The museum offers tours for fledgling ghost hunters, and even offers nighttime tours where you have a free roam of the facility, with nary but a flashlight to guide you if you're feeling brave. And if you're feeling truly brave, keep clicking through on Most Amazing and watch all of the fantastic top 10 scary content we've got. And if you got a little room left over, you should check out Top 5 Scary. I hear some of the hosts there are just lovely. Number 9. La Plaza Mansion. The La Plaza Mansion is a now abandoned, allegedly haunted mansion in Las Vegas that was once home to a notorious mobster known as Tony the Ant Spilotra. Over the years, there has been a score of rumors and hearsay out of the Plaza Mansion as to what kind of violence has happened inside those walls and inside the secret tunnels that are built underneath it, as well as the secret rooms around. It makes a good sense that a place where mobsters would meet and greet probably saw its fair share of dark dealings. Various inhabitants over the years have complained of spirits on multiple occasions. One particular vivid story details someone being choked after a glass of wine exploded mysteriously. As well, female guests have reported hearing hooting and hollering while showering at the Plaza Mansion. Pervert ghosts. Yeah, learn something every day. The mansion is closed, but it recently went up for sale again, but it's been struggling to find a buyer. I guess no one really wants to buy a home where you know a ghost is going to be watching you use the loofah. Number 8. The Flamingo Resort. The Flamingo was the prized property and hotel of Bugsy Siegel, the legendary New York mobster who is the undisputed first king of Las Vegas, as he was influential and key to the development of the Las Vegas Strip, becoming the beloved den of sin that we know today. Unfortunately for Bugsy, he didn't get to enjoy his time with his precious flamingo very long, as he was assassinated by a rifle in his own home 6 months after its grand opening. Well, if you believe the rumors, maybe Bugsy keeps finding his way back to his favorite spot, as there are reports of all sorts of sightings of that checkered coat. Fun little aside, little trivia for some of the gamers out there, the villain of Fallout New Vegas, Benny, was directly based on Bugsy, down to the trademark jacket. Anyway, guests of the Flamingo Hotel have reported hearing strange whisperings at night during their rooms, and claim that spectral apparitions have been seen in the presidential suite, Bugsy's old personal room in the hotel. There have been reports of seeing the notorious criminal in the garden as well as the chapel. Perhaps he's still got unfinished hotel business to take care of, or maybe he just loves that spot so much he can't move. Number 7. Pioneer Saloon. The Pioneer Saloon is a little bit outside the strip proper in the town of Goodsprings, and I hate to bring it up again so soon, but if you're a gamer with a keen eye and you're wondering why you recognize this saloon, yep, that is where the tutorial from Fallout New Vegas happens, and it is 100% of why I can't stop banging on about it in this video. But besides being one of the places that Courier 6 first ever stepped foot and began their journey, it's also one of Vegas's most haunted attractions. The Pioneer Saloon is the oldest bar operating in Nevada, and as such, one of the most haunted for years and years of stories. It's said that the wife of Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, can be seen wandering around the saloon at night looking for her husband to console him, but she's not the only one. There's rumors of a spirit of a kindly old prospector who sits at the back of the bar in the wee hours just to make sure ain't nobody causing no trouble. Easy Pete? Lastly, there's a spirit of an old western bar brawler by the name of Paul Koski, who was sent 6 feet under when he was caught cheating at a hand of cards. The coroner's report for him is posted on the wall. They say near the dead of night, you can see a figure of an old gunslinger bleeding out of his side, watching the bar. Number 6. The Mob Museum. Hey, there ain't nothing to see here. Move along at this one. There's nothing to see at point number 6. Well, actually there is. Quite a lot. The Mob Museum is a showcase to the people that made Las Vegas what it is today. Gangsters, crooks, criminals, and all. The museum serves as a monument to all things crooked and corrupt, and is built in the old Las Vegas courthouse, where several of the people who are featured in the museum received the sentence that would change their lives, so to speak. As well, one of the most prominent features of the museum is a swath of the brick wall from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, still riddled with bullet holes from the infamous Bloody Clash. Employees who work at the Mob Museum claim that in their time, it's not uncommon to see shadowy figures wandering through at night, quite possibly the lost souls of old mobsters who never got a peaceful rest, probably due to, being perforated by bullets. Number 5. The Luxor Resort. The Luxor Resort has been host to paranormal rumors pretty much since it was constructed. Maybe it's because it was built to look like an ancient Egyptian tomb. Maybe it's the gigantic black pyramid with a giant light atop its peak that looks like it's a dark temple that's attracting all of the malevolent energy in the world inside the Luxor. Could be that. An unknown number of construction workers died during its construction, and shortly after its opening, 2 guests jumped from the balconies. You should know too as well. The Luxor is also home to a massive collection of artifacts recovered from the wreck of the Titanic, all the way up to a giant piece of the bulkhead complete with a piece of the window. You gotta imagine if there wasn't already enough evil energy inside that building, bringing in a bunch of relics from the Titanic has gotta push it overboard. No pun intended, wow. Employees have reported that deceased passengers from the Titanic came with their relics, appearing, disappearing, and making their presence known. Some rooms in the resort are even modeled directly after rooms in the Titanic, where people report increased spiritual activity. Maybe they feel at home. Number 4. Fox Ridge Park. It's not all glitz and grime all the time in Las Vegas. There still has to be a community, The people have to live somewhere. Can't all just be wall-to-wall casinos. There has to be room for grocery stores and places for people to play. Perhaps once you've had your fill of shooting craps, you can take a walk down to Fox Ridge Park, a small little playground in Henderson, the the city that neighbors Las Vegas. The story goes that a long time past, a boy was run over by the park, and his soul has been bound to it ever since. People report seeing the swing set moving when no one's around or no wind could be blowing it, and even outright saying that they see spectral apparitions. He's apparently very angry, however, and I never quite got over his condition. And it's been said that he takes the form of a demonic entity or some monstrous specter to would-be paranormal investigators who go and disturb him. So it might be best to leave this one to the pros and check out some of the other stuff on the list. Tell Zach Baggins about this one. Number 3, Rhyolite Ghost Town. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll go through it anyway. After you've made a day seeing the sights of Las Vegas, consider taking a road trip outside of the strip to Rhyolite, an abandoned ghost town just outside. It used to be a prospering mining community during the gold rush, but was abandoned altogether in the panic of 1907. It still stands now as a monument to an America long gone, a town frozen in amber, perfectly preserved. Even just looking at it, pictures of it is kind of giving me the willies, you know? You look at it and it feels like things should be moving and bustling, but instead it's just a graveyard. You can wander around the remnants of the old town, seeing the desolate ruins of a bank and a jail. Because of its eerie, abandoned nature, it's a very popular spot for paranormal enthusiasts to scout out to try and see if maybe, just maybe, they can catch a bona fide ghostly gunslinger or vanquished varmint still wandering around on this mortal coil. Number 2, Hoover Dam. Hoover Dam? What? Really? Well, yeah, you would be surprised how many rumors and ghost stories I found about Hoover Dam while researching for this video. So many of them, they ought to call it the Hoover Dam. Thank you folks, thank you. I'll be here all week. Not really, just this video, but you can catch me on Top 5 Scary if you liked me. In the years since the impressive dam's construction, it's seen its fair share of fatal jumpers who chose the iconic landmark as their last destination. As well, over 100 workers were fatally injured in the construction of the dam between 1931 and 1936. Some visitors to the dam report hearing dripping water and what sounds like malfunctioning equipment despite everything working in order. As well, some of the employees who work at the dam complain of tools missing or things malfunctioning, not working properly during the lower levels. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. When Hoover Dam began to rise, so did the waters of Lake Mead. The town of St. Thomas had to be evacuated. After the water levels of Lake Mead had calmed, and after 70 years of the water receding, the ghost town of St. Thomas was officially unearthed. While the town was evacuated under government order, there's no proof one way or the other to say that everyone did. So it's entirely possible that some residents of St. Thomas could have been trapped there, and their souls now doomed to the dam forever, alongside jumpers and poor workers, making it a real hot spot for paranormal activity. Luckily, I have to imagine a dam that big's gotta be keeping some of it in, right? And finally, the #1 most haunted spot in Vegas is Bally's Las Vegas Resort. In 1980, a raging fire scorched the tower of the original MGM Grand Resort. It was an absolutely dreadful disaster that claimed the lives of 85 people and badly injured many, many more. The building was restored and sold and renamed to Bally's in 1985. But given the building's treacherous backstory, it's no surprise how many guests complain about paranormal experiences there. Guests who stay in the original refurbished tower complain of overwhelming smell of smoke or the sounds of people screaming throughout the night. Others notice that on higher floors, the furniture will move unexpectedly, or windows have been shut or even locked that can be found open. It's thought that these are the spirits of those on the higher floors desperate to escape, not knowing they never will. There's a famous ghost in Bally's, residents claim to see, of an old woman who sits at a slot machine on the casino floor, blankly pulling the lever and idly playing calmly until she bursts into flames without making a noise, and then vanishing in the blink of an eye. She only appears for seconds at a time, but she's been purportedly seen many, many times. Ugh.
Number 10. Nakagasuku Hotel. In 1975, a World Fair was planned to be held on the island of Okinawa, commemorating the American return of the island to Japan 3 years prior. Located on the Motobu Peninsula, this was a high-profile event to be sure, and one businessman from the capital of Naha saw a great opportunity for profit. The businessman chose to build the hotel with an excellent view of the Pacific Ocean and East Chinese Sea, and, however, construction was immediately hindered by warnings from monks that the land they were building on was supposedly the home to a great deal of sacred locations and burial grounds. These warnings were ignored, but as accidents during construction began to increase, progress was halted as the workers began to fear that the build itself was cursed. In an attempt to encourage the workers to return to their jobs, the businessman made a show of living on the premises until the project was finished. 3 nights later, the man lost his his mind and disappear. Do you think that you could stay for more than 3 days? It's pretty beautiful, so long as you don't mind the angry ghosts and demons. Number 10. The Lizzie Borden House. A bed and breakfast located at 230 2nd Street is home to one of America's most haunted and mysterious homes. The Lizzie Borden House gets its reputation from the unsolved murder of Lizzie Borden in 1892. She's one of the most infamous true crime figures, known for killing her father and stepmother with a hatchet. There's a twisted rhyme about this incident, but I'm not gonna sing it here. I'm not getting cursed on YouTube. So on August 4th, 1892, Lizzie's stepmother of 27 years was struck 19 times while her father, Andrew, was hit 11. Although Lizzie Borden was acquitted and found not guilty, the dark history draws in crowds every night for its nightly tour of the premises. The Lizzie Borden room, the infamous room where these horrors took place, is requested the most for paranormal overnighters. Some 1408 stuff. Would you do this? Who does this? And it's not like you can just, enjoy a lovely all-inclusive breakfast, but there's also the nightly house ghost tour, the ghost hunt, and all of that, which attracts fans of horrors every night of the year. Number 8. The Chu Mansion. When Chu Jinshan and Chu Weiqing moved to Shanghai, they did what anyone would do with a suddenly gained fortune. Built a big old house smack dab in the middle of Shanghai and threw a bunch of animals inside. And not just any old animals, they kept tigers, crocodiles, and peacocks on the property, building a massive garden for their captive creatures to prowl. Their decadence was unmatched in the entire city, which makes their sudden disappearance all the more mysterious. The animals were sold off or eaten, and half of the mansion was converted into a middle school during World War II. However, in 2002, the land was bought to make way for a commercial complex. During this time, a nurse by the name of Li Fei claimed that she'd had to treat several construction workers for what were described as bite wounds. The workers recovered, but they were too terrified to return to the site. Later, several blogs described an attack in the area, as a mason attacked his manager with a hammer, claiming that lizards were making him do it. Then, only a month later, a woman living near the building claimed to see a dragon along the arm of one of the construction cranes. And if that wasn't enough, on several forums, employees of a hotel across the street from the building claimed to see ghostly animals leering in the distance. So yes, you could knock on that door. Just make sure you get your hand back. Number 7. The Haunted Ballroom. Now we're talking. This is one I for sure would want to check out. I would definitely moonwalk in a haunted ballroom. The house, if you want to call it that, is a mansion/castle that was built between 1871 and 1887 for a New Zealand politician, William Larnack. Like any other Disney castle, you have about a 3,000 square foot ballroom. Larnack gave his 21-year-old daughter a ballroom for her birthday. Here you go, Kate, now, go make a friend or two. Good luck. What would you want a ballroom for? It's just the worst gift. What happened to ponies? Well, Kate sadly passed away due to typhoid cancer, but the death doesn't get in the way for her. Apparently, the spirit of the youngster is still said to haunt the ballroom. Number 6. Lawang Sewu. Designed by Cosmin Citroën, Lawang Sewu, which translates to 1,000 doors, was the center of operations for the NIS, the first railway company in the Dutch East Indies. The complex is a collection of 4 small buildings and was a fairly beautiful, if nondescript building when the Japanese army invaded in 1942. Under their command, the building was converted into a brutal dungeon where all manners of horrific war crimes were carried out by the Japanese imperialist forces. Retaken by the Indonesian army, the complex fell into disrepair, its white paint beginning to crumble and the facade falling away to a much more sinister disposition. Legends began to circulate of the ghosts of decapitated prisoners searching for their heads, and a vampiric mother resurrected to prey upon the living, making her nest in the rafters. All of this meant that these 1,000 doors would have trouble opening for any business other than historical preservation. In that case, do you think you'd be willing to knock on one of them? Number 5. Edinburgh Castle. In Scotland's capital city, I've been there a handful of times, and it's one of my favorite places to visit. It's got a nice little castle, this Edinburgh Castle. Of course, you have to visit it every time that you go. It's a real castle. half workout. Some of these parts are just chilling. You can really feel the haunt in the air. And these rooms date back to more than 900 years, so the walls have seen a few fortnights. Sightings of colonial prisoners from the American Revolutionary War are common, so that's terrifying, as well as French prisoners from the 7 Years' War. If you're thinking about visiting, perhaps the ghost of the wandering dog in the castle's cemetery will convince you to stay a night. Number 4. Leap Castle. Going from Scotland to Ireland, the ancient history of Ireland is steeped in blood, and there's no better place which better exemplifies this than Leap Castle. Constructed between the 13th and 15th centuries, the castle was originally known as Leap of the O'Bannons. Subject to the O'Carroll clan, a number of power struggles were had as various groups attempted to vie for the castle. Two brothers of the O'Carroll clan turned on one another, and in an event that would be known as the Bloody Chapel, one would slay the other in the middle of a service, running him through with a sword in front of their family. Later, it would be passed on to the Darby family. Now, Mildred Darby would frequently hold seances in the castle, leading to the stone walls becoming home to all manners of ghosts, spirits, and worse, a reputation. Some of these ghosts included the Red Lady, who stalked through the halls with a dagger, and two youths, one who fell from the battlements, and the other still looking for her sister. Number 3. Ram Inn. Also doubling as a functioning pub located in England, the inn has been owned and operated by many folks since the 1100s. The ancient Ram Inn has been investigated by years of paranormal researchers. Shows like Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted, you name it. They've all done paranormal research at the ancient Ram Inn. And by research, I mean they just kind of stood around for a bit in the dark and taking notes. I could never do that, and legend has it that the energy from Stonehenge apparently feeds the property's paranormal power. Not to mention, the backyard is also home to a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. Stonehenge feeding power, I mean that's one way to save on your electricity bill. Number 2. The Poveglia Island Asylum. Poveglia, lovely little island just outside of the city of Venice. Well, good luck getting there, because it's completely closed to the public. Fairly unnoticed until 1776, the Madrastro alla Sanita took control of the island, using it as a checkpoint for seafaring goods headed to the city proper. If you remember your Euro history class, you probably know where this is going. In 1793, the island was turned into a massive quarantine zone for the bubonic plague. What buildings did remain were then transformed into an asylum for the insane in the 1920s. Apparently, even with a doctor that supposedly experimented on their patients' brains before leaping from the building's tower in 1930, driven mad by the ghosts of his victims. The asylum was open for about 44 years before it was closed in 68. Well, there have been attempts to reopen the island as a park. None have really been successful, but honestly, I think I'd rather just not go trick-or-treating in that neighborhood. It kinda sounds like a rough part of town. Number 1. The Queen Anne Brick Mansion. Heading over to Georgia for this haunted mansion. When I say mansion, I mean Haunting of Hill House type mansion, not quite like a Will Smith mansion. You know, in Savannah's Columbia Square, the Queen Anne Brick Mansion was initially built in 1892 for William and Anne Kehoe and their 10 kids. After a few deaths took place in the house, the building was converted into a bed and breakfast, and since 1992, guests have reported hearing footsteps and sounds of kids playing. I wouldn't want that at a regular bed and breakfast, let alone a haunted one. I would just like to sleep.
Coming in at number 10, we have Audley's Town. Historians are baffled by the lost County Down Irish village of Audley's Town. The town was run by landowner, the then Lord of the Land Viscount Bangor, who lived in the town's manor, Castlewood. When he died, his wife remarried and evicted all of the townsfolk. She then sent them off on a boat called the Rose, and they were told to set sail to Boston. The Rose left in 1852, but the boat never arrived in the New World. Some say that Lady Bangor's new husband, Major Savage Nugent, hated the townfolk and had them killed. These days the town is covered over by woodland, and part of the disappeared town was used as a setting for Game of Thrones. Coming into number 9, we have the trenches. This is so sad. During World War I, Europe kinda lost it. I say kind of, like it literally did. Countries turned on one another and fought a bloody battle to the death. On one side, side was Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Canada, and eventually Japan and the United States. On the other was Germany, Austro-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. From October 1914 to March 1918, neither side made much ground and was stuck in a deadlock battle fought in trenches along the western front of France. It is thought that the total length of the trenches was around 2,490 kilometers. Not only did millions of people die in the trenches, they lived in them too. They were forced to live in squalid conditions. Millions and millions of men. For all intent and purpose, these long thin trenches were towns. Then, as the war was over, the trenches were abandoned, leaving a history of bloodshed and violence in the ground. This is what they looked like over 100 years ago, and now this is what they look like today. This is the battlefield from Beaumont-Hamel in France, a notable fighting spot in the Battle of the Somme. Haunting. Coming into number 8 is Calico. Here is a picture of me at Calico Ghost Town in California. I stumbled across the place on Christmas Eve in 2017. It was a very interesting time of life for me then, and coming across a ghost town seemed to kind of fit with that weird and intense era. So Calico was an old silver mining town in the San Bernardino mountain range. The town was a flash in the pan of the Silver Rush era and was abandoned in 1907 with a brief return in 1915 when a cyanide plant was built to try and restore economic fortune. Sadly for Calico, it was to no avail. The town is undoubtedly mysterious and spooky up in the mountains and in the middle of the desert, which is pretty remote. It is also said that the town is haunted by not one but 5 ghosts. There's a little girl ghost who only appears to children. There's also a ghost named Tumbleweed Harris, the lady in a white gown who wanders the outskirts of town, an angry cowboy, and the ghost of a dog named Dorsey. Coming into number 7, we have the Library of Alexandria. Alexandria is a coastal city in Egypt, sitting at the south of the Mediterranean Sea. The city dates back to 331 BC and was once the thriving capital of Egypt, but was reduced to nothing more than a small fishing village in the late Ottoman period. Brutal ransackings and an earthquake destroyed a lot of the original ancient landmarks, including the Alexandria Lighthouse and Cleopatra's tomb, which has notably never been found. Most notably, however, was the biggest loss suffered by the city, the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Now this was a massive library, so big that it was hailed as the most significant in the ancient world. It was said to contain the equivalent of 100,000 books, which in the early days of the written word was a lot. It's uncertain who destroyed the library, just that it's no longer there. Julius Caesar's been blamed, but so have many people who ransacked the city over its history. Moreover, while the city has been discussed a lot in literature, we don't know for sure if it ever really existed. Alexandria as a city was rebuilt eventually, and a city of the same name stands in its place, but the original landmark is by and large lost to the ground in the ocean, taking many of the secrets of the ancient world with it. Another ancient one up for you next. At number 6, we have the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Now the Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They've been described as some of the most fantastical roof gardens of all time and were thought to have been located in Babylonia in Iraq. The gardens were believed to have been destroyed sometime after the 1st century AD, and many archaeologists have spent their lives looking for their remains. The existence is not confirmed by archaeological findings, and there have been suggestions that the gardens are mythical. That being said, they were thought to be in Iraq, and much of the country has been super ravaged by war over the years. Okay, I have to deviate from this video for a second to ask if anyone else remembers the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in Bill and Ted, because I absolutely swear that there was a Babylon bit, but I can't find it anywhere online, and rather like the gardens themselves, I'm thinking, are they mythical, or is this like a Mandela effect thing that I've just discovered? Let me know. Coming into number 5, we have Tyneham. Tyneham in England is a pretty spooky village indeed. The ghost village in South Dorset was abandoned in 1943 at the height of World War II. It was abandoned for fear of bombardment from the German forces. 225 villagers were rehomed, all of which thought that they would return after the war, but mysteriously the British government purchased the land and kept it for military training. The village is now opened at various times of the year for controlled tourism, but those who have been lucky enough to visit claim that it's very spooky indeed. In fact, some even claim that the village telephone rings even though it's disconnected from wires. The village was featured in a television show, Mysteries of the Abandoned, and this is what was said by visitors.
The village pond looks like any other village pond in England, except there's no wildlife there. There are no ducks It's eerily empty.
Shut the front door! No ducks on the pond! Must be cursed, right? I have to say that the documentary is super dramatic and I kinda love it. They claim that it's eerie and that the church remains as it was in the 40s. Have a listen to this. I'm very, very here for the dramatic music.
At a darker narrative. Like the cottages, which are little more than empty shells.
And these are in an unusual state of disrepair.
Da da da! But where are the ducks? Questions. Coming in at number 4, we have the lost villages of the St. Lawrence. Controversially, in 1958, 9 villages were flooded along the St. Lawrence River in Canada. Now this was to make way for the St. Lawrence Seaway. The project was unpopular as 6,500 people were displaced, and of those people, the residents believed that the money that they got for their homes wasn't enough because the plans had already depressed property value. The villages were all in Ontario and are now under the water in the St. Lawrence River. Some of the areas are now popular scuba diving spots. Eerily though, it is possible to spot the outlines of the villages from the water when levels are low. Another sunken city at number 3, we have the withered city of Villa Epicuén. Villa Epicuén was a popular tourist resort near Buenos Aires, Argentina, but unfortunately it flooded in 1985, which meant that hopes and livelihoods had to be abandoned in the water. Can you imagine? Disappearing into the water, Villa Epicuén became a sunken town. However, weirdly, the waters began to recede in 2009, and now, after a drought, you can see more of the town emerging from the water than ever. 25 years after it disappeared, it began to re-emerge, only this time it was totally white, stripped of paint. The trees have died after their time underwater and away from the sun, and now they're white too, and the whole thing just looks ghostly and twisted and withered. Rusted cars and dislodged bathtubs litter the bank. Honestly, it looks so scary to me, but I also kinda love it. This town or city, more like, still exists but may not in our lifetime, so I want to give you a little warning at number 2. We have Venice. Venice is sinking. The historic town is made from 118 small islands connected by bridges and dates back to the 10th century BCE. The issue is here climate change and tourism. Cruise ships are turning up in the harbour, which disturbs the waters. Thousands of passengers disembark from the ships and trample the city, rarely without buying anything and contributing to the economy that could actually help save the city. The old buildings of Venice don't have stable foundations and they're gradually subsiding into the waters of the lagoon. Marry that with tourism and overcrowding and the rise in ocean levels in general, and it seems very much on the brink. It would be devastating to lose this city. Finally, coming into number 1, we have Happy Valley. Happy Valley is not a happy place to be. The town used to be known as Williamstown and is located between Syracuse and Camden in upstate New York. Founded in 1850, the town was a farming community, but it was abandoned in the Great Depression. That being said, the Depression probably wasn't the reason people left, if the rumours are to be believed anyway. It is said that the men of Williamstown angered a witch that lived on the fringes of the community. How they angered her? Well, some say they taunted her, others say they abused her. Either way, in a fit of rage, the town was suddenly struck with plague that killed a whole chunk of the population. On top of that, crops began failing. Today, those in surviving towns near Happy Valley claim that actually it is haunted and they will not venture into the abandoned spot.
Starting us off at number 10 is Louisiana Old State Capitol. This neo-Gothic cathedral-like castle was built back in 1846 after the Louisiana legislature decided to relocate the capital away from the sinful lifestyle scattered across New Orleans. For many years it housed some of the most esteemed and prestigious lobbyists and lawmakers, and although it's no longer used for politics, it is far from empty. Said to be haunted by numerous entities like a security guard and a girl who lived nearby during construction, the most notorious is that of Pierre Cuvion. Once a senator in the Capitol's prime, it said Pierre dropped dead from a heart attack in the building after a spirited speech about the corruption of politics. Visitors say his ghost still haunts the halls to this day, and he can often be heard stomping around the Senate floor or playing tricks on the staff. Once while making his nightly rounds, a security security guard, an alive one to be clear, not the ghost, said he felt a tap of a cold finger on his shoulder, but when he turned around, nothing was there. But he knew he wasn't imagining it, as afterwards it sounded like something or someone was giggling. Most creepy of all is the numerous reports of staff saying they've seen motion detectors go off only to find an empty room upon inspection. So they would go back and check security tapes, but nothing had entered or left at the time the sensors were triggered. Coincidence? You tell me. Coming in at number 9, the Woodland Plantation. Owned by notorious pirate and seafarer William Johnson, during its active years it was used as a sugar plantation, housing and torturing a multitude of slaves. It likely comes as no surprise that Johnson was not revered as a kind man. Not only did he frequently kill for his job at sea, but he was notoriously cruel to his slaves too, with many reporting he would not bat an eye, executing or beating any who dared question his power or stepped out of line. Today, those brave enough to visit report hearing the cries of the tortured souls echo through the house, as well as lights turning on and off independently, and unexplainable bursts of cold air even in the blistering heat of summer. Most terrifying though is those that have witnessed the ghost of Pierre Lafleur, a man who briefly lived at the house after its days as a plantation, who after running out of money took to the chandelier in the living room and tragically ended his life. I will not be taking my chances with that one. Next up at number 8 is the USS Kidd. Maybe I just watched too much Pirates of the Caribbean as a kid, but there is something extra scary about a haunted ship. During World War II, this boat was a destroyer ship for the US Navy, named after Admiral Isaac Kidd. Kidd tragically lost his life to the attack on Pearl Harbor, but surprisingly, this isn't where the boat gets its ghost story from. On April 11th, 1945, a Japanese plane committed a attack, plummeting into the boat, killing 38 sailors and leaving 55 others badly wounded. Today it's no longer used as a warship, but remains docked in the Baton Rouge as a war memorial, and all that enter say they've felt spirits of the sailors who lost their lives inside. Visitors claim to see full-bodied apparitions of the spirits decked out in their war uniforms, as well as ghostly arms and legs creepily floating around, looking as if they were brutally ripped from the rest of the body. But whatever you do, just stay away from the sleeping quarters, as that's where things get even worse. Those that have ventured down say the blood-curdling screams of the soldiers can be heard bouncing off the walls, and some even say they've been pushed or grabbed by the tortured souls right up until they step foot off the ship. Coming in at number 7 is Chrétien Point. First run by Hippolyte Chrétien, a French colonist, Chrétien accrued a massive wealth operating his cotton plantation off the backs of slaves. On top of that, Chrétien also had some less than friendly friends, one of which was the famed pirate Jean Lafitte. One day, Chrétien's son, Hippolyte II, fell in love with the neighbor girl Felicity Nada. She was a fiery, passionate, and independent Spanish woman, and despite pushback from his father, Hippolyte married Felicity and the pair remained happily together. Once his father died, Hippolyte took over the family business, but sadly he died of yellow fever shortly after in 1839, leaving Felicity to keep things running. She took pride in this position and accrued even more wealth than her father-in-law or husband ever had, eventually even becoming friends with the pirate Jean Lafitte herself, just as her father-in-law had. But after Lafitte's death, his crew thought they could pull the wool over Felicity's eyes and steal from her beloved home. But they were no match for the widow. Upon the break-in, she shot a pistol right between the eyebrows of one of the pirates, sending the rest running for their lives. Eventually, Felicity died, but eternally devoted to her plantation, her spirit has never left. Visitors say you can still hear the deadly gunshot clear as day in the hall, as well as the sound of bodies tumbling down the stairs. Just be careful if you do decide to visit. Felicity does not always take kindly to visitors. Next up at number 6 is Labo Mansion. Once the plantation of a wealthy businessman in 1846, in 1905 the property was sold and converted into a hotel and casino. Now at the time, gambling was outlawed in New Orleans, but it became quite the popular hang spot during Prohibition. While patrons were likely pulled in by the promise of booze and gambling, it didn't take long before they realized the building was haunted by dozens of spirits. Partygoers often complained their watches immediately stopped working the minute they stepped foot on the property, only to magically be good as new once they left. Many claimed to hear strange noises echo through the halls, and others nearly fainted seeing the woman in white who sat on the upstairs porch. Then in 2013, a group of so-called paranormal investigators that by the sound of it were more like a group of drunken idiots, snuck onto the property looking to catch one of the many rumored entities said to haunt the historic halls. But having no real clue what they were doing, decided to light fire on the building in an attempt to provoke the spirits to show themselves. Sadly, all they did was burn it down. However, the fire was no match for the spirits. Even without the walls to hold them in, all the entities remain haunting the property. Those that walk by say their watches still stop working the minute they step foot on the property, and sometimes at night you can hear the cries of the terrifying woman in white. Next up at number 5 is Lloyd Hall Plantation. After leaving his London family for a new life in America, William Lloyd built his plantation in 1820. It's rumored that Lloyd was actually exiled from his family's insurance dynasty, hence his sudden move to America, but no one actually knows for sure. Like all plantations of the time, it was a cruel and brutal place for the slaves, but the owner was swimming in money and profit. That was, however, until the Civil War, when it was discovered that Lloyd was working as a double spy for both the Union and Confederacy. Once word got out, Union soldiers stormed his house and tarred and feathered him before he was hanged for his disloyalty. It's said Lloyd now haunts the house along with the many slaves that died while under his care. But that's not all. Others reported a Union soldier named Harry who was shot while hiding in the attic, as well as Lloyd's niece who, after being left at the altar, jumped out the second-story window to her death. Those brave enough to step on the property claimed to hear piano and violins despite no one playing, ringing doorbells when no one is outside, and see furniture moving around all on its own. Some say that if you listen carefully, you can still hear the screams of William Lloyd echo across the property. Coming in at number 4, Huma's house. By this point, I am sure you have put together that there were a lot of plantations in Louisiana during the early 1800s. Among that list is Huma's house. Said to be haunted by countless spirits of tortured souls from its time as a plantation, the ghosts that live here are sure to send you running for the hills. Among them are 16 souls said to be trapped inside oak trees across the property. All the souls trapped inside lost their lives during a dangerous construction project gone wrong. The trees were a cherished entity to the house, but workers cut down many of the historic oak trees before sending them down the river to be milled. There were 16 profiteers set off aboard the backs of the big tree trunks, but somehow their bodies were never recovered. It's said they remained trapped inside the trees as punishment, stuck on the property they tried to cheat. Among the haunted trees is a mysterious girl in a blue dress, often seen staring at visitors while she remains perched at the top of a staircase, but in the blink of an eye she'll disappear into thin air. And if a creepy girl apparition and Harry Potter trees don't scare you, then just wait until you feel the hand of a cold spirit grab your shoulder. You will never want to return as long as you live. Coming in at number 3, Taylortown Tower. Once a booming church amongst the community, shortly after its opening in 1906, membership began declining at a rapid rate, and soon the church became abandoned and used for hay storage for the nearby farmers. But how did it go from a church into a bell tower? Well, as the legend goes, a local plantation owner's daughter was engaged to be married, but on the day of her wedding, the groom couldn't go through with it and disappeared without a trace. The bride was absolutely devastated, and in a fit of depression ran to the nearby abandoned tower to end her suffering. It said the bride jumped from the top of the tower to her death, and her father was so distraught when he happened upon her body that he burned the church down. In a cruel twist of fate, all that survived the flames was the very tower she had jumped from, taunting him until his dying day. Locals say that when there is a full moon, the bride can be seen wandering the land looking for her loved one, screaming and crying out after him. Next up at number 2 is the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. Back Back in the day, the Bourbon was a highly frequented theater and ballroom where wealthy Creole men could sneak away from their wives to secretly engage in erotic nighttime affairs. But all the fun came to a screeching halt in 1816 when a fire took out most of the building. Fast forward to 1881 and the building was put up for sale and purchased by a community of nuns. But after a brutal yellow fever epidemic struck Louisiana, many nuns and orphans' lives were lost, and that is where the ghost stories begin. Today the building operates as one of New Orleans' most luxurious hotels, but make no mistake, it is haunted by at least 20 different terrifying spirits. Guests have reported the sounds of laughter in the halls when no one was around, and some swear to have seen young people lying in beds with mists of black fog hanging over them. But most terrifying is the ghost who resides in room 644. Rumor has it that during its time as a monastery, a nun took her own life in this very room. Those that have stayed reported hearing blood-curdling screams from the room at all hours of the day, and any guests brave enough to sleep the night were awoken by the nun staring at them over the bed. So if you're looking to be haunted by a creepy nun on your vacation, be my guest, but I'll be looking for different accommodation. And last up today in our #1 spot is La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits, and some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's four walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor reported to have died on the steps of the hotel. But the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black, sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair, and said, quote, "You belong to me, I'll never let you go." Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could.
This list in our #10 spot, we have Grand Union Hotel. This hotel resides in Fort Benton, which is one of the oldest towns in Montana, and it was first established by the French-American fur traders Auguste and Pierre Chouteau in 1846. While much of the town has been dismantled by the years, the Grand Union Hotel still stands, and it is among the oldest in the town, with its initial build taking place in 1882. There are many ghost stories and haunting tales that have come from this hotel, but I will tell you one of my favorites. Apparently, this hotel might be the home to a paranormal horse. A phantom horse. It really doesn't get more interesting than that. People have reported hearing the stomping of hooves, and they believed that this horse belonged to a cowboy who, one night after having a few too many pops, tried to ride his horse up the main staircase before he was shot by the hotel manager. In our #9 spot today, we have 2223 Montana Ave in Billings. This address seems a little suspiciously specific, but the story behind this haunting is quite a tragic accident. In 1945, on December 8th, an airplane that was transporting World War II soldiers who were returning home from war ended up crashing in a field east of Rocky Mountain College. 17 servicemen and 2 pilots lost their lives in this crash, while there were only 4 survivors. This is of course a lot of people, and at the time it was too many for the morgue to handle at one time, so the majority of the bodies needed to be stored somewhere else for the time being. This led to 13 of the bodies being held at a refrigerated warehouse of the local grocery store located at, you guessed it, 2223 Montana Ave. This address has had many different businesses come through its doors since this tragic story occurred, and with all these businesses, the same chilling stories have remained. Employees and customers have reported seeing the ghost of a man in a World War II era military uniform inside of this location. Considering the year years it's been, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere soon. In our number 8 spot today, we have Fort Peck Theater. This town dates back to the building of the Fort Peck Dam because the town was initially built to temporarily house the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, workers, and their families. In the 1930s, while building the amenities that would be needed, the Fort Peck Theater was also built in order to provide the residents with some entertainment. The theater is still used to this day, mostly for theatrical productions, but it's also full of paranormal entertainment as well. The theater is said to be haunted by a male spirit who appears wearing 1930s work clothes. Some visitors even report hearing sounds of men at work even when the theater is empty, and sometimes apparitions even appear in the dressing rooms. I just think that's the most theater thing ever. Ghosts in the dressing rooms? Shakespeare would love that. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Boulder Hot Springs Inn and Spa. This inn is located, of course, in Boulder, and it is actually a place that dates back to a time before Montana was even a state. This now historical landmark was initially created or recognized in 1881, and it was a place where businessmen, miners, and ranchers could all go, and here they could sort of mingle with each other. In this day and age, it is said that you might still be able to mingle with those guests from all of those years ago. As legend has it, this place is highly haunted. The most well-known of the ghosts here, however, is that of a woman named Simone. It is said that Simone sadly had her life taken in the hotel, and that her spirit now resides there. Visitors and staff alike have reported some really strange occurrences, like extreme temperature shifts, drastic changes in energy, and even the sound of children running through the halls when there is no one to be seen. In our number 6 spot today, we have St. Charles Hall. The oldest building on the Carroll College campus, which is located in Helena, is said to be St. Charles Hall, named after St. Charles Borromeo, who the college was actually initially named after. The building was originally constructed in 1904 and is mostly used as a dorm for students now, and those who reside in this dorm have quite the stories about the men's washroom on the 4th floor. This is said to have been the site of a horrible tale. Story goes that in 1964, a student blacked out while brushing their teeth, and as they fell, they hit their head on the sink in the bathroom. They were treated at the local hospital, but unfortunately passed from their injuries and complications. After this, students using that bathroom began to experience strange happenings. A glance in the mirror would have them seeing a young man standing behind them with a head wound. Some would turn on the faucet and see blood flowing rather than water. After years of these reports, the bathroom has apparently now been locked up and is no longer in use, but people still report hearing scraping sounds from the inside. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Many Glacier Hotel. The Many Glacier Hotel has sat in its home on the eastern shore of Swift Current Lake for over a century now, and with history like that, there is bound to be many a ghost story. Other hotels in the area too have talks and tales of hauntings, but none seem as active as the Many Glacier Hotel. A ghost hunter by the name of Karen Stevens has taken to documenting some of these paranormal stories. One of the most frightening is the tale of a young boy who apparently witnessed a woman in a red dress standing in his hotel room. Guests aren't the only ones, however. Employees too have had their own encounters. The most active room in the hotel is apparently room 308, where you can not only hear strange noises, but also see apparitions that vanish into thin air just as quickly as they appeared. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Daly Mansion. This mansion is located in Hamilton, and in its previous life, it was the farmhouse to the Copper King Marcus Daly. He purchased this home in 1886 and put it through some extensive renovations for it to become the sort of Georgian revival style that it still has today. In 1941, when Margaret Daly passed away, the house fell into disrepair after several years of being neglected, and this led to the state purchasing it in 1986. The state began restoration work on the property, and this is when many of the haunting tales started to spread. Smoking, of course, is not allowed in the home in this day and age, but many visitors to the home have experienced the distinct smell of a cigar smoke that seems to be coming from what was once the office of Marcus Daly. Not only this, but in the music room, there is a painting that just can't quite seem to stay on the wall, but no one has ever seen it fall off. Some even report to have seen the ghost of Mrs. Daly themselves. In our number 3 spot today, we have Grasshopper Glacier. This place is quite different than the others on this list, but for me, this place is the stuff of nightmares. Yeah, if you aren't a fan of bugs, you can go ahead and skip this one. If I were you, I would go. A glacier in Montana is the home to many grasshoppers and locusts. Yeah, imagine heading to a glacier, but you forgot bug spray. What a fool. Oh wait, I forgot. Grasshoppers, they don't care. They aren't mosquitoes, they're absolute savages. Appropriately named Grasshopper Glacier, the mile-long glacier near Crook City holds the remains of extinct grasshoppers. The only thing worse is if they all came back to life. These guys likely were in the middle of travel when they found themselves stuck in a blizzard, and now they're stuck for the foreseeable future. This is like a very forbidden version of one of those like scorpion lollipops. In our number 2 spot today we have Virginia City. This town is often referred to as a ghost town due to the fact that as of 2020, the population sat just slightly over 200 people, and it is no surprise that this ghost town is said to be the home of some of Montana's most famous hauntings. Virginia City was first founded in 1863 by prospectors who originally named the area after the wife of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. The name was only changed when a judge, Judge G.G. Bissell, who was signing the town's registration, objected to the name and instead ruled it to be called Virginia. The town's population began to grow once people heard of the nearby gold deposits and discoveries. As the town grew, there wasn't sufficient law enforcement, which meant that there were a lot of vigilantes out there looking to take the law into their own hands. This led to many people who were suspected of being traveling robbers being hanged by said vigilante groups. By the time the 1940s rolled around, the town was in ruins. Charles and Sue Bovey ended up coming and buying up all the property they could, and the town now remains a tourist site, but not without some ghostly tales to spice up the story. One of the most well-known ghosts is that of a tall man in a blue Civil War soldier's coat, and he is often said to be found walking around the town's boardwalk at night, smoking as he strolls. Another one of the most famous sightings is that of a woman and a young girl. Little is known about their story, but they are often sighted by tourists. In our number 1 spot today we have Deer Lodge. Deer Lodge at the old Montana Territorial Prison, now known as the Old Prison Museum, once held prisoners for over 100 years. It apparently was quite a lousy place during that time that was full and overcrowded and had terrible food, and it was just a very dangerous place. Many inmates took each other's lives here, and with all of the stories from when this was a prison, it's just clear that if any place were to be haunted, it would absolutely be this one. There even was a huge riot that broke out in 1959. Since this prison closed down in the 1970s, the tales haven't become any less grim. Visitors report hearing eerie noises, and some have even felt the sensation of being touched. Many people believe that the ghost of convicted killer Paul Eitner, known as Turkey Pete, still haunts cell number 1. He was incarcerated at the prison for 49 years before he passed away in 1967.
Number 10. Driscoll Hotel, Austin. While there are many reportedly haunted hotels in Texas, this one seems to top many lists for the most ghostly activity. Most of this seems to stem from the very chilling stories of room 525. In the 1880s, there was a young couple that was having their wedding at the hotel, or at least that was the plan. The groom got cold feet and left the bride at the altar. Now, heartbroken, she ran upstairs to their suite, room 525, and took her own life. And it said she still walks the halls in her long white gown. But that isn't the end of the story, because in 1991, another bride was spurned at the altar, and after going on a shopping spree with the groom's stolen credit card, she too returned to room 525 and took her own life. Since then, guests have seen her carrying a pistol and walking into the room, all without ever opening the door. So don't stay in room 525 or you may never check out. There's also an eerie painting that's said to be inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, the daughter of a senator, whose expression seems to change on its own. People who view the painting have said that they feel like they were floating off of the ground, though they remained on the floor. They also say that their equilibrium and balance was off for a few hours after looking at her. Number 9. USS Lexington, Corpus Christi. Now before I tell you about this spooky ship, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our amazing videos. As a naval vessel that saw actual battle, there have been multiple lives that were lost on board, including that of an engine room operator who still roams the ship at night waiting for the battle to end. The crew of the ship have often reported flickering lights and doors slamming on their own, which, given that this is a very well-maintained historical site, you'd You'd think that they would have found the cause by now. Maybe it's just the ghosts of sailors lost to time. Coming in at number 8, we have the Marfa Lights in, you guessed it, the town of Marfa. While there is so much beauty in the area and plenty of non-spooky reasons to visit, the main tourist attraction to this quaint little town are floating, sourceless lights that seem to change color and even move in the night sky. Many visitors make the journey at all times of year to see the lights, and there's even a yearly festival made in their honor. Reported since 1883 by people of all ages and professions, no one knows what these floating orbs are. They appear at random, but usually in the same area of the sky, and since there's so much open space and low light pollution, it's perfect for stargazing, or seeing spooky orbs, I guess. Some say that these lights are UFOs, some say spirits, and others think that they're just headlights. All that I know is that if I see a mysterious floating orb, I'm going the other way. Number 7. Woman Hollering Creek, San Antonio. Said to be the home of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, this creepy creek leaves anyone who visits with a sense of dread. As the story goes, La Llorona was a woman who was distraught that her once doting, affectionate husband left her for another woman. And after confronting him and leaving the confrontation with cuts and bruises, she waded into the water, dressed in her best clothes, and drowned herself in the creek, right after doing the same to the rest of her family. Her chilling screams for her children can be heard all the way from the highway, giving her and the creek its very apt name. Many people have felt themselves being drawn towards the water by ghostly voices, and some have even been tugged towards the bank of the creek. Perhaps it's La Llorona looking for her next victim. The screams heard and feelings of being pulled into the water have mostly been reported by younger people, making this all the more terrifying given what La Llorona did. Number 6. El Paso High School. Now, when you're thinking of haunted places, a school isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind, but this one has quite a story. In 1985, the graduating class received their yearbooks, and when basking in the nostalgia of their group photo, they noticed something odd. A woman who no one could identify was in the picture with them. Now, obviously, that would be quite concerning. I know I'd be freaked out if there was someone I'd never seen before standing next to me in a picture. The blurry apparition still has not been identified to this day, but some think it's a student who fell from a window years before, who never got to graduate. I say give her the diploma. She's already in the yearbook. Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die," and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through. At number 2 on our list, we have La Carafe in Houston. This historic bar, built originally as a bakery in 1860, has been serving patrons for decades, but many come not only for the drinks, but for a paranormal experience. Bartenders and visitors alike have seen apparitions of a hulking man walking upstairs and hearing his giant footsteps pacing the floor. No one knows who this may be, but some say he died there from some nefarious means. The former manager of the bar can also be seen staring out of the top floor window, looking over his patrons and ensuring they're having a good time. And he seems a bit more friendly. However, there are some that report the sounds of a body being dragged across the floor above, but when the sound is followed, nothing's there. Makes you wonder what happened upstairs. And since it's one of the oldest buildings in the city that's been in continuous use, it's become a tourist hotspot and a historical site. Personally, I won't be stopping in for a drink anytime soon, no matter how good the cocktails are. And finally, number 1, the Alamo. While students are taught to remember the Alamo, they don't really teach about all of the spirits who can never forget. In the infamous battle, thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and many were dumped into mass graves and others left to rot out in the sun, so it makes sense that you'd have some pissed off ghosts wandering the ground. There have been countless reports of soldier apparitions walking with weapons in hand, taking their usual patrol, and even full platoons screaming and charging into battle. Even in the afterlife they couldn't get away from war, and so they continue to fight their invisible enemy. There are also accounts of a small blonde-haired boy hiding in multiple places where the gift shop now stands, so make sure to pick up your haunted keychains. While the buildings are beautiful to look at and the area is interesting to explore, the history can leave one with a haunting feeling, and with all those spirits around, I'd be careful touring here, especially at night.